So this week, the Senate actually passed a bill to actually codify, same-sex marriage and interracial marriages in America. It was the Defense of Marriage Act or Respect of Marriage Act or something like that. I don't remember the name. But what was so interesting is that people act like that this is somehow, a big threat to their own individual lives. In America, we have this weird kind of relationship with marriage. We have these people who love marriage, and marriage is the end-all be-all, and when you're an adult you're supposed to be married because you're supposed to get married and have kids, and that's kind of like the American way of life. But we've also kind of bad-mouthed marriage. We have this belief that for every 2 marriages that happen, we have a divorce. And that happened because we actually started playing games with the numbers a long time ago. And I'm sure you've heard this. They tell you have a 50-50 chance of divorce if you get married. That's not necessarily what the truth is. In any given year, let's say that you have 1 million people that get married. So you have 1 million marriages that happen. In that same year, you may have 500,000 divorce proceedings that start. So you're talking about 1 year. So in that 1 year, for all of the new marriages that start, you're going to have about half that number of actual divorces. But that's not the entire 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years of marriages. Divorce is not as prevalent as we think it is. And it's kind of crazy, the relationship that we have with it. Because we actually act like more people are not married than they actually are. In America, straight, heterosexual adults, 53% of them are married. That's the truth. And if you talk to people, they actually think the number is much lower than it is, but start going around your neighborhood and talking to people. 53% of adults that are heterosexual are married. Marriage is fine in America. Most people stay in marriages way longer than they should if it's a dysfunctional marriage and it's not a good marriage. They stay because they believe the lies about, well, I don't want to be those people that, 50% of marriages end in divorce. 50% of marriages don't end in divorce. The numbers are actually much lower than that. If you're talking about over 40 or 50 years, okay, but the numbers actually came from 1 year snapshot. If you had 1 million marriages, you had 500,000 divorces being filed in that same year. You're not looking at the entire life of marriages. 53% of people that are adults, that are heterosexual, are married. That's a huge number. That's the reason you don't see that many single people, because actually they're not the norm in heterosexual communities. Most people are married, and most people stay married for longer than you think, and they're actually they stay, if it's a bad marriage, they stay longer than they should have stayed when they should have walked away, because they don't want to be one of those statistics. That's crazy. But I will tell you, gay marriage is very different. So let's look at just gay and lesbians and bisexuals and people who identify with those communities. Only 1 in 30 people are married in those communities. That doesn't look like that's big of a threat to me, to the overall heterosexual or the overall, American way of life or church life in America. We gotta start looking at things like what's the bigger threat and what's not the bigger threat. I'm more worried about lies and manipulation threatening a marriage than I am about, one couple out of 30 possibly affecting your marriage. The numbers are huge. If you have 2 straight people, one of them is probably going to be married. If you have 30 gay people, only one of them is going to be married. The numbers are not even close. The people who are gay that are getting married, they're not a threat to heterosexual marriages. They're not. People who are different kind of lifestyles and stuff, they're not a threat to your marriage. What the threat to your marriage is buying into falsehoods. If you love the person you're with, that's the only thing that matters. If your relationship works for you, that's the only thing that matters. Don't buy into the bullshit. Don't buy into the lies. We have enough of that. I'm somebody that I absolutely love numbers, and I'm fascinated by things that we believe, but they're not necessarily true. But then if you start looking at the numbers, you find out what the truth is, and you're like, you do not have a 50-50 chance of your marriage ending. That's bullshit. That's to manipulate you to keep you in marriage if it needs to be dissolved. Most people who get married stay married. They do. and they stay married for many, many, many years, if not their entire lifetime. Most people who end their marriages, they end it because they no longer worked. It no longer was good for them. Divorce rates in America are not 50% chance. If you get married next year, you don't have a 50% chance of your marriage ending in the second, third, or fourth year. Your marriage, whether it succeeds or it fails, lies with you and your partner. It has nothing to do with anything else. Don't buy into the numbers, because they manipulate numbers. They take little snapshots of different times and different places and want you to like focus on that, but be smarter than that. Be smarter than that. The reason they said that 50% of marriages end in divorce, they took 1 year, and they've kept this lie going for the longest time. They took 1 year and looked at how many marriages happened that year, and they looked at how many divorces happened that year, and that's how they got the 50% number. Most people do not have a 50% chance of divorce when they get married. Most people who actually like are in marriages, most of them, which is like 80, 85%, stay married for as long as they want to stay married. The probably 10 to 15% that actually get divorced, they probably got divorced later than they should have got divorced. We play these games with numbers because we want to control people's behaviors. We want them to like do what we want them to do. If they married, we want them to stay married. But if somebody's unhappy in their marriage, if it's not a functional, if it's a disruptive, it's an abusive relationship, they need to leave the relationship. Don't buy into the stereotypes. Don't buy into the lies because they don't serve anybody. If you are married, your chances of success are actually pretty high. You didn't marry that person on a whim, and the people who got married and you believe that in the back of your mind, well, I got a 50% chance of divorce, well, that's self-fulfilling prophecy. That's not what the reality is. Divorce is absolutely a choice and is absolutely an option, but that's not the numbers. That's not the reality. Like I said, 80 to 85% of marriages last as long as they want them to last. Most of them last for the people's lifetimes. It's a very small amount of people that actually get married and get divorced. It's a lot lower than people think, and it's not 50%. It's not. So you got to start asking yourself the right questions. And the people who are gay that are getting married, they're not a threat to heterosexual marriages. Like I said, if you have two heterosexual, two straight people, one of them is married. If you have 30 gay or lesbians, only 1 out of 30 is married. It's not comparable. It's totally, it's totally different things. You're comparing apples and oranges, and you're talking about like totally different numbers and different data, and it's not the same thing at all. Work on your own marriage. Don't be worrying about anybody else's marriage. Stay there if it works for you and it works for the person you're with, but if it's dysfunctional, if it's not good for you, if it's abusive, leave. And you're not a failure if you do leave, because guess what? 50% of marriages do not end in divorce. Most of the marriages that end in divorce happen because they needed to happen. It's that simple.